please click the OK button when you see it pop up on your screen. So my name is Bill Pike, and I am the coordinator for Arizona MESA. I am also the lead content person for the poster section, or the lead of the subcommittee, or the poster is my baby. And so, so this is what it is. And with me, I have Manny Leon, and I'll give him a chance to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Manny Leon with Arizona MESA, and I'm the lead of the subcommittee for the design brief.
All right. And so what we want to do is make sure that we share, this is what we've written, this is how we changed the judges, so that you can take that back to your students, so that when they do the poster and the design brief, they know what the judges are going to be looking for. Right. And we're going to start with the poster because I wrote this presentation, and so I went first. So here we go. All right. So just some really important information we need to know about the poster. Right. The first thing is that the poster is really that visual element that I alluded to in the opening. And it's really so that someone can walk up, see the poster, get a good idea about what the project is about, and then to start that conversation with the students. So we really want them to show off, hey, this is what we've done. This is all the cool things that we've built into this project. And now I want to talk to you about it. So, you know, we need to have some way for students to be able to come in and start having that conversation with people. And this is the way that we're doing that. Right. So we're going to give an overview of the project. There's going to be a little bit about their beginning, a little bit about their end, a little bit about where they're going, a little bit about their data. There's going to be a lot of different information that's on there. And we try to make sure that it's not anything onerous or overwhelming, but it is going to give just a general overview about what that project is. And the nice thing about the poster, it can be used in any of the other competition elements. Right. And so visuals are always good. You know, we are a visual species, and being able to show off, right, here's a picture about what we're talking about, because people can build any sort of image within their mind about what they've been working on. But really, if we show this is what it is, there we go. It's making a lot more connections within people. And I'm a little famous or infamous for saying this, but we don't want any paragraphs. You know, we don't want to have a novel written about what the project is. We want to be able to say, hey, bullet point list, or something really quick and easy that someone can read it, understand it, and then start having that conversation. So remember, this is a conversation starter, not I'm going to stand there for 20 minutes and read about your project. And then for those of you who have done this before, it is very similar to last year's requirements. And so there's not a lot of difference within what we're asking you for the poster. So if you haven't seen it already, here's a copy of the rubric. So the important things is we're looking, you know, here's what's our problem statement. And notice that it says 30 words or fewer, right? So we want to make sure that people can read it, understand it, and then go from there. And the nice thing about this problem statement can be used across all the pieces there. And so we go down, and here's where we're talking about different pieces of what do we, you know, give an overview of that project. You know, what's the objective? What does the user want? Remember, this is the client-based thing. So what is the user asking? You know, what is the prototype? How do they go about their designing and testing? What's some of the data that they have from that? What's the results? What's their conclusions? And there's a piece about the readability. So we want to make sure that it's readable from a little bit away to kind of draw people in to talk about it. This is just page 1 of the rubric, but this is really where the meat of all the details is. And if you're wondering, oh, can I get a copy of that? The answer is stay with us, because yes, you will. So I want to take a look at this poster right here. And if we look at this, we can see in the upper left-hand corner up here, problem statement. It's a quick and easy problem statement. We've got some pictures there about what they're addressing, which is great. There's some visual elements. There's visual elements throughout this whole space, and it's kind of broken up into these different things. They have all these requirements, and as we get to the end, there's a little bit of a paragraph, and then some more bullet points. But notice how as we look at this, there's broken up in terms of the information that's given with words and information that we can see through pictures. This is the winning middle school's poster from last year at Nationals. They scored really highly on that. And yes, it is wordy in some pieces. Okay, and that's fine. But notice how that there's a lot of information that's given both in a visual form as well as in the words. And this is really kind of the objective about what we're trying to get with the poster is we want someone to be able to come up, take a look at it, maybe spend 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer if they're, slow reader or something like that, to really sort of, all right, now I understand what is the problem, what have they done, what is their solution, and where are they going with this project. And the nice thing with the data that's given there that at the bottom in the middle is that they can see, oh look, we've tested this a couple of times. We figured out what is happening with this project, and maybe they're going to ask some questions about that. Or hey, here's our prototype. I'm going to ask some questions about that. Or this is how we designed it. Or this is what our user wanted to know. And so, is it expandable? Is this something where, and this has happened a couple of times, where someone walks up and says, hey, you know what, this is a really cool idea. Maybe my company wants to. So there's a lot of different things with this. But notice how there's a lot of information on here, but it's not just, I'm going to sit down and read. It's a very visual element to start that conversation with students. And one thing that I want to make sure that I mentioned, if you have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question. I don't mind that at all, and actually prefer people to interact rather than just sit quietly and listen to me. I'm not that interesting. So any questions or comments about this poster?
Bill, in the rubric, and it went by very quickly, but it said something related. I think the second item was something about implicit and explicit. How does it express itself in this poster? And I think in the high school was slightly different criteria than the middle school.
Right. That is a great question. Thank you. And I totally forgot to say anything about that. There is one difference between middle school posters and high school posters. So this is the middle school poster. So there isn't anything about user requirements versus explicit versus implicit. An implicit requirement is that there's something that the user didn't say, but you need to do that. And that is only for high school posters. And so the example that I like to use is, say you're living somewhere where it is below freezing most of the year. Whatever the student's design needs to address the fact that it's going to be freezing, and that would be an implicit requirement. So if for instance, if I'm working with someone who has mobility issues and we come up with our prototype, one of the implicit things that needs to happen is that they need to address, oh, this needs to be easily reachable or grabbable for that person with that disability. And so there's a lot of things that we want high schoolers to think about in terms of, all right, we're designing this. The user has given us some requirements, but there's some other things we want to make sure we're paying attention to. So for example, here in Arizona, it's hot during the summer. And so we want to make sure that whatever we build works within the high temperatures, 110, 115 during that summertime. Or if you're somewhere really cold most of the year, we want to make sure that it works within that implicit space, that we know it's going to happen. We want to make sure that we're addressing that.
So really, in essence, the high school team needs to make the implicit criteria explicit, right, in their project. They need to give expression to that. Correct.
Because, and we know that, so like here in Arizona, we know that if we're working outside in the summer, we're done at 9 o'clock. But otherwise it's too hot. And I think both Manny and I can share stories of we're outside, we're listening to music on our phones, we put it down somewhere, and 5 minutes later, the phone shuts off because it's too hot. So that's one of those implicit things that we need to make sure we're paying attention to.
Sir Bill.
Yes.
Is there a specific number of students that can join this team, like for this poster? Do you have any number or?
The team size in the team size is between 3 and 5.
3 to 5. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. But for this paperwork, like the problem, objectives, or whatever, are there specific number of pages that you want us to submit, or?
For the poster, so I'm only talking about the poster. When Manny gets to the design brief, we're going to talk. He'll talk about that. For the poster size does need to be between 24 and 36 inches to 36 to 48 inches. And different states have some different requirements in terms of what they'll accept at both regionals and their state competitions. For the national competition, it needs to be in a engineering poster, which then they will print. New Mexico is going to print this year. And there is a template on the website that was put into the chat that you can download, and the students can just put that in, can put all the information into that poster size, and it is the correct size.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that, so yeah, I think Bill kind of mentioned this, but all students that go to the national event will have to create a digital poster, right? So it's not a hand-drawn or hand-created poster. It'll be a digital poster like this one.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions before we continue on our journey?
Are there any particular apps or software that you would recommend for kids to make posters like these?
It's really easy. PowerPoint. You can set
PowerPoint?
PowerPoint. Yeah, PowerPoint. You can set that. The template that was put into the chat was done in PowerPoint. And you can just download it, and then they can do what they're going to do with it.
So in PowerPoint, you can set a page size that big?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's an important piece because some people will go into PowerPoint and then not set that page size. And then their poster is actually like really small and outside of specifications. So that's like that first step when creating the poster, because then you also have to create the graphics and create the text large enough to fill that space. Where if you created a smaller one using in PowerPoint, and then we try to print it to use it somewhere, it would be small. And if we try to blow it up, you lose all of the, you know, it would just become a mess.
Yeah.
It would be so blurry because of blowing it up to that size.
Right, which is why I made the template for the poster, because we've had that problem and it's been across the country. And so the template is the right size. And so they can do all their great work and then put it into there, and it won't automatically disqualify them for being the wrong size.
Canva works very well for the poster. If anyone is used to Canva.
It does. I unfortunately don't have as much experience with Canva, but there's a lot of stuff out there. So Canva works well, PowerPoint, Google Slides. There's some other design software. I think Adobe has, there's like 85 different Adobe products. I don't remember which one, but Adobe also has the ability to be able to do that, and it works really well. So what I would say is, for everybody on this call, use what you use already in your schools. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. And just make sure the size is right. And then if you have something that isn't, Microsoft, then you can use that template. And the nice thing is that there are sites out there that will convert it to whatever you want to do too. I know I use Zamzar a lot, zamzar.com. It's a free conversion, and it will convert it for you and then put it into whatever format you need it for. I want to take a look at another poster here. So as we look at this poster, and this gets in a little bit to what Case is asking about explicit versus implicit requirements. This is the high school poster, and you can see in the top right-hand corner here, they identify these are the explicit and these are the implicit. Okay. But when I take a look at this poster, the first thing that pops into my head is too many words. As you can see across the bottom, it's written in paragraphs. There's a lot of words in here and not as much visual effects. And so what we want to do is make sure that we take some of these paragraphs, and how can you put it down into bullet points, or how can you take it and not say as much? Because remember, the objective is we want someone to take a look at this, spend a couple of minutes taking a look at the poster, get a good idea about what their project is, and then be able to talk to the students. And if we give a lot of information, people are just going to be like, I don't want to read this. It's too much. Or, sometimes I think about my 80-year-old mother who has problems seeing, and she'd just be like, I can't read it. I'm just gonna walk away. So we want to make sure that everybody can take a look at this and say, all right, I've got a good idea, and not have to do too much about that. And if you look at this if you look at this project, you can see, all right, this is probably designed for smaller users, say children. We want to make sure that kids are looking at this and say, oh, hey, what is this? Can I use this? So too many words is a bad thing. Bullet points are amazing. Use bullet points, use bullet points, use bullet points. So any questions about these two posters that I've shown you? Right. So what I want to do here, because I used to be a teacher and just sit and listen to someone we know is not the best thing in the world, I want to give you a chance to take a look at a poster and see what you think the score would be. Right. So what we're going to do, we're going to put into the chat here. Where to go? Where to go? Give me a second here.
I got you, Bill.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
That's the rubric, right? And then I'll paste the other one too.
Okay, here I've got them separated already.
Okay.
All right, so there we go. So there's the rubric and there's the poster. The rubric is going to force you to make a copy because I want everybody to do this a little bit separately. And we're all going to judge the same poster. And this is the poster last year from the Maryland High School. Okay. So what I want to do is you have a copy of the rubric, you have the copy of the poster, is score this poster. All right. And then we're going to try to get a feel for how the judges score it. But one thing that I want to make sure we know is when I showed you the rubric, that was page 1, and page 2 is really the gimme points. And you can see there I've listed them out. So whatever score you come up with, add 4 to, because it's things that at this point students would have. We know it's the right size. Do they have their name on it? We're all teachers. We always make sure they put their name on it. Team member names and the logo. And I know each state is always just like, hey, make sure you have all these things on there. So what I want to do here is take about 8 minutes to pause, give you a chance to score that poster, and then we'll come back and we'll show you the score that it was and talk a little bit about that space. So any questions before I turn you loose? Okay, then go ahead and
Yes,
start.
yes, one quickie. I tried to click both of these links from Manny and Bill, and then when I tried to click on make a copy, nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
No, the Google Doc opens up, and I'm doing it right now. Oh, it does. Okay, it just
took a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it was. I guess it was thinking.
Yeah. All right. So we've got about 7 minutes. So go ahead and do that, and I'll call you back at 12:11 Arizona time. 2 minutes, 2 minutes. All right, so it is 12:11, and I said we started again at 12:11. So hopefully you were able to get through that. And so now I want to kind of take a look at what you scored and also what the judges scored. So at nationals, this poster had a score of 50. Right? And there were multiple judges doing it, and so the average was 50. If you're within 7 of that, you scored the same way that the judges did. Was everyone within 43 to 57? Was there differences? Okay. So I see Melba got a 41. That's still pretty close. Just out of curiosity, Melba, if you care to share, if you don't want to, you don't have to. Where did you score a little bit lower?
Are you asking?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. Okay, no worries. And one of the things, as we're doing this, I know that one of the spaces that I used to inhabit when I was a MESA advisor was I always scored my students a little bit harsher than what they got at our MESA day. But this was a poster. It was middle of the road. I think it actually was the 4th out of the 7 teams that competed. So this isn't it wasn't the best poster, but it wasn't the worst poster either. The nice thing is that if you go to the site that Manny put in the chat earlier, the NEDC site, you can see the posters to be able to see who got first, second, and third, and kind of use some of those faces. Right. You felt like you didn't have enough time. Right. And I very much recognize that, and I understand that. We only have an hour to do this, and so I've got my 30 minutes. Manny has his. But that is something that if you go through a little bit more, you can take some time to really work your way through that. But yeah, time constraint is definitely one of those spaces that we're inhabiting right now.
Bill, sorry for cutting in here, but I'm not sure if everybody knows that at the NEDC, each of the 4 components will get a first, second, and third prize. And then there's the overall, of the competition. I think that's maybe important to know that the students can get a first prize in poster, but they may end up like being third overall or even lower than that.
Right, because we do try to make sure that we acknowledge the students for their individual accomplishments and the individual pieces, as well as the overall.
Sir Bill, how many % is the poster and how many % is the presentation?
I don't know the percentages off the top of my head. I know that the poster is worth 75 points, and the design brief is worth 50 points. I think that both the pitch and the technical interview are worth 100 points, and you can do the percentages from there. And so, really the big thing is the interview and the pitch. But the nice thing about the poster is that it takes elements from both of those spaces and puts them onto there. So students really don't need to have to work harder of like, oh, I need to create 4 separate pieces. It's really, we're creating our overall project, and then we're taking the pieces out of that we need and putting them into these different spaces. So, as we talked about at the beginning, the design brief is really kind of starting at where did they start with, who is that person or those persons that we're working with. So there's giving us really a good overview of that space. This is a whole overview of the project in that community sort of space. And so, they all tie together into what we're asking the students to do.
Okay.
So any other questions about the poster?
Yeah, and then I'll just say with the poster also, so at the national event, especially when we're in person, we do have that poster symposium, right? So the idea is we have all the posters on display. There's an opportunity for students to stand by their posters, and then people can browse and talk to one of each other and ask students questions. Students can visit. We tried to do that in the virtual space as well. That piece, there's no scoring involved. That's just an opportunity for everybody to congratulate them on the work well done, ask questions, get to know more about the students and their projects. So there's not really like a formal presentation. It's a part of that symposium. It's not scored. We are just looking at the poster for scoring.
Thank you.
So I have a question on the rubric. What were the highest categories that the judges gave then? What are
The highest scores.
the highest category? Which of those parts of the rubric got the highest points or the lowest points?
I can't speak to the national space because I don't have those individual
Okay.
scores. I know for Arizona, it was really about the information about the project and then that prototype visual and the prototype details. But each state could be a little bit different. You would have to talk to New Mexico, and I don't know if they'd be willing to share those individual scores and that sort of detail in the scoring.
I understand.
Yeah, and it partly depends on who the judges are, right? Each set of judges are going to be somewhat different. There's only so much we can do to control that. We do provide some training. We try to provide some kind of lining up of expectations, and right, and we try to provide, we usually have like a video or a training we'll do with the judges, so that way we can kind of control for as much of that as possible. But there's always going to be, right, each judge is going to kind of view it in their own way, and so it just depends.
Right. Which is why which is why we always have multiple judges. Like we always try to have at least 3, sometimes more. And then there's some mathematical models we can do to see, all right, is this judge consistently scoring high or low? You know, how are they doing their scoring to make sure that it's equitable for all teams across the board? And it's not just, oh, hey, I'm from California, so I'm scoring California really high and everybody else really low. So any other questions about poster? All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Manny for design brief.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so for the design brief, again, it's a design brief. There is a sample on the NED website. So if you wanted to share that with your students, you can. The link is there. I think, oops, my Zoom went away for a second here. I don't know if you can kind of post that in the chat there, Bill.
Well, because I'm sharing my screen.
Oh yeah. I had to get over to it. So let me grab that real quick. I was on a different thing. All right. You can go ahead and move it forward there. So there is that sample. Again, the design brief is meant to be a snapshot of the project, right? And it's a supporting element for the other parts of the competition. So I think as students are developing their design brief, it's really important that they kind of keep that in mind, right? That it's brief, it's a snapshot, it's not supposed to be super detailed. And it's just kind of a quick look. Next. Again, it needs to be brief and it's non-technical, right? So we're not looking for a ton of specific data. We're not looking at, a lot of some of the things that would be the technical aspects students are going to cover in other parts of the competition, right? And if you notice, each of the different elements of the competition all serve their own purpose, right? So there's going to be a little overlap between, but the presentation of those overlapping parts may be different aspects or the different pieces that make up the national competition. Similar to, whereas with the poster, they don't have to use a provided template. We want all students to use the template that's provided, and that template can be found on the website as well as with the specs as part of the resources. And if your state had made any slight changes or has like their own version with the state logo on it or something like that, talk to your state representative for that template. But there's a specific template that we want all students to use for that. The really important thing, right, is it should be clear, it should be concise, right? We don't want students to get too wordy. They shouldn't just kind of ramble on. It's going to be a quick read, right? So someone has like 5 minutes and they want to know more about your project. You could hand them this document. They could kind of quickly read through it and they'd have a pretty good idea of what it is you're trying to do. And then just a reminder that there is a 10-point penalty if the template is not used, or when you submit it, and this is at the national level, again, things might be a little bit different at your state levels, if it's not in PDF format. Just keep that in mind, because we don't want students to lose points unnecessarily. All right, so this is basically very similar to the rubric. I wanted to just kind of quickly go through all the different pieces that are our rubric and kind of give you an idea of like what are the things that we're looking at and going into. So obviously there's, and you'll notice each of these pieces will build on the next one. So that's the idea, right? As you're reading through the design brief, you're kind of progressing through the project. So the first part is just a title, right? It's a catchy title. It's something that might just draw them in, or they like pique the interest of the reader. It should be representative of the purpose, which is the next piece, right? So example, the MESA inequity reducer 3000, right? So it's like, oh, okay, so it's supposed to reduce inequity. That sounds interesting. I wonder how it's going to do that. And then you get to the next point. It's a 25-word max. Again, that's a max, right? Students don't have to. It's not going to necessarily help them score-wise to use all the words. We're trying to create that upper limit so that it's not getting too wordy. But if they're only using 10 words and it's catchy and it's clear and it kind of gives you an idea of what the project's about, that's great. That's perfect. So the students shouldn't be looking to try to fill up the word limit. That's not the point. The point is to kind of just create that cap. And that title is only worth 0 to 1 point. So it's a you have it or you don't have it kind of thing. The next piece would be that project purpose, right? The really important parts of that is, you're going to identify the inequity, and then you're going to explain what the project wants to do. This is the inequity, and this is what we hope to do to reduce that inequity. And again, it's supposed to be short, right? It's just real quick. What's the purpose of our project? The 50-word max. Again, you don't have to use all 50 words, and it's 0 to 2 points. So you get an idea of kind of like what are those pieces that are going to lend to have a better score on the design brief. And you can tell by the different point levels. Everything from here pretty much to the end is going to be at that 5-point level. So they're kind of equally weighted. The next piece will be an abstract. So that's a little bit longer, right? That's going to be a paragraph probably that students will write, something that could stand on its own and give a pretty good idea of the project just by itself. But it'll describe who the project will help, right? Who is that user? What are their challenges? What's the inequity specifically? And then describe your solution. And when we say describe your solution, we're not saying describe the thing that you're building, right? It's saying, describe how you intend to address the challenge. That's what we're really looking for in the abstracts, and not necessarily the description of the prototype or anything. So you give an idea what the project's about. Then you say, okay, so let's tell you why we got to this place, right? So students will be discussing their research, not necessarily putting a lot of data points in there, but just kind of what's that key info that'll help people understand the people, how the inequity affects them, and what the students learned about their users and the barriers they face, right? So let's set the scene, basically, is what we're trying to do with the research, right? Why is this an important thing that we want to address? Then you're going to go into the user insights again, and you'll see 200-word max on all of these pieces. Again, don't have to use all 200 words. The insight's a little bit different from the research, right? We're really seeing, did the students kind of develop that empathy? Do they really have an understanding, right? So go beyond the data. Do they understand the experiences, the emotions, the motivations of the people they're trying to help, right? And I like to put these questions in there, right? That with each piece, the student should be answering these questions, right? So with the user research is, what did you learn about the user and the barriers they faced? With user insight, it's like, how do these barriers affect the user, right? What does it look like in their everyday to-day life? Why is it such a challenge? And then the needs is, a list of the things that the user needs to address that inequity, right? It also includes features and functions that are needed from the project, right? So these are going to be not necessarily, not all of these will be addressed by the thing that the students are developing, but it gives you, it's a kind of a hopefully a complete list of these are the different needs, right? And then we say we decided to address certain ones, right? But the point of this piece is to answer the question, what will help the user overcome the barrier, right? So each piece is, again, informing the next. Next page. All right, so then continuing down the rubric, we'll go into project goals, right? So now that you know what this, you know, who it is and what the issues are, and then what the needs are, now you're getting into, this is what we intend to do about it. What are the goals, right? This is what we hope to accomplish. Just so the students will describe the goals, how those goals will meet the needs and address the inequity. So students should be answering, right? Always looking back on the questions. What do you want the project to do to help the user? And you'll notice that one's got a little bit of a smaller word max on that one. So, you know, probably just a bullet point list, right? Not going into a whole lot of detail. Again, the design brief. Then the key features, right? You're doing those features. How do those features meet the goals? So it's that answering, how will this project help the user? Then you get into the impact, right? So what impact will this project have, right? How does this help the user in addressing inequity? Are there impact statements, right? A lot of times we don't necessarily, and I know it's sometimes it's hard for students, but we really want the students to be talking to, having real people that these projects are based around, right? So hopefully in the research, they're talking about interviews that they've done or interactions they've had with the user, right? In the impact, right? Hopefully they're saying, hey, now that we've kind of gone through this process and come up with some ideas, we've shared that back, right? There's that feedback loop with the client. And this is what they've told us. You know, we presented them to our idea. They told us that this idea was great or wasn't great, or they'd like to see this, or wow, this could really have an impact. What are those impact statements? Hopefully they can share that within this piece. And answering that question, how does the project help the user? And you notice we're not necessarily looking for the prototype here. So you could potentially do the brief without having actually created something. Yeah, the graphic at the end, you know, would be helpful just to give people a visual, but you don't necessarily have had to have gotten to that point with the project to have a really good design brief. So that's where you talk about the status of the project. Where are you with the project? You know, have you gotten to the development stage? Have you kind of put together just a single prototype? This could be completed before the students even finish their project, right? They could, and what they bring to the national event or to their state event may be steps beyond when the design brief does. So this is kind of like a technical report. It may be just information from their design notebook that they've pulled out before actually having done any actual building. It could still just be in the brainstorming stage for the most part, and do fairly well with the design brief. And again, including feedback from the users, right? That those users should be a part of this process the whole way through the project. Then your reflection, this is about the students themselves. This is separate from the project. What did they learn about human-centered design? What kind of personal growth or insight that the students gain about designing for other people, about addressing inequity? So it's less about their project and more about how the project affected them. And then of course there's the graphic, right? So, you know, just give us an idea of what it is they're looking at. What's that visual piece? It's a single graphic. You can have a max of 4 views. And then you have a max size, and you should label those key features. But again, that's only 0 to 2 points. So in totality, the design brief should be that clear, concise, progressive overview of the project. And you feel like I'm repeating myself? I kind of am, I know. That's because we really want to hammer that point through. And so, right, the max is 1,775 words, right? It might be similar to what we would have asked for if you've been with MESA for a while in the technical paper, right? But we know that writing can be intimidating for students. So we've kind of broken it up into smaller chunks. So the students may think, okay, these word maxes, they may not be too bad for each of these pieces. But when you put it all together, they've done some substantial writing about their project. And that's what we're kind of hoping for. We want to reinforce that writing is important, give them that practice, but it's non-technical. The graphic doesn't have to necessarily be digital. It can be hand-drawn, but it's going to be a picture that they're going to place into the template. So at some point it will become digital, even if the students hand draw it themselves. The important part that is that it is clear, it's easy to read, right? The labels are featured. So no, points won't be deducted if it's hand drawn in that case. So that
Okay.
kind of gives you that,
I was gonna say, and kind of going back to my my point about work smarter, not harder. That prototype graphic, you could use the exact same picture in the poster and the design brief, because we're talking about the students' prototype and what they made. And so you could use the same picture and just put it into 2 different spaces, and that's 100% okay.
Mhm. All right, next piece. So we're gonna do similar to what Bill did. Here's my inspiration for this. So we're going to have a practice. There's a rubric. We're gonna give that rubric to you, and then we're gonna ask you to judge the Arizona Middle School poster. And let me grab those links from the PowerPoint real quick, or the slides. Put those in the chat. Similarly, I think we've got about 12, 13 minutes left. So I'll give you about 6 or 7 minutes. We'll go to like, what's that, 12:38-ish. So we have a few minutes to wrap up. But yeah, open up the rubric, and then take a look at that design brief. Again, it should be a fairly quick read, score it yourself, get a feel for what it's like. And then we'll come back here and reflect on that process that you went through, and then answer any final questions you may have. So see you back at 12:38.
And I'm assuming you meant design brief, not poster, right?
Yes, design brief. Does it say poster? Oh, it does say poster. Design brief. Okay, you have about 2 minutes left. All right, final few seconds. Go ahead and wrap it up. All right, so I know it was a short amount of time, but I hope you had a pretty good idea. And this poster, yeah, go ahead, Bill. This poster had a score of 36. Again, we had 3 judges look at this during the national competition. So that's the average. Not every judge was exactly the same, right? So if you were within 5, then you scored basically the same as what the judges would have scored. So again, fairly average, right? 50-point max, so it was above average poster, which we kind of expect most of them will be if they've gotten to the national level, right? You might see differences at your kind of local or state levels. You may not see scores, you know, like this, but you know, our state champions, we expect them to be a little bit better. And they also, you know, we might score them a little bit tougher at the national level than we might at state. Again, it just depends, you know, on the judges that we have. So any question about the brief or the poster? We've got about 5 minutes left in this session. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. Or thoughts, entertain any thoughts, comments, feedback. And you can put them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourselves.
Or if you know any good jokes, we're always looking for good jokes.
Right. And then just a quick reminder, when the session is finished, we will have a half-hour meal break before our next sessions, and feel free to refer back to the document that Anita sent out on that. And then again, so the last 2 years of the national competition, things shifted a little bit between, I think, 21 and 22. But if you go to the state teams tab, you see last year's teams from each state. And then all the way at the bottom, you can see the previous year. So you've got, you know, a good amount of posters, of design briefs that you can use as references, right? This process of, you know, taking a look at a poster and then having students score it is a good way for students to get a feel for what is it that we're looking for, right? Really understanding what's in the rubric, because you can read the rubric and be like, okay, I think I get it, but that doesn't always work for students. So giving them these examples, giving them an opportunity to score a poster, score a rubric themselves could really help them as they design theirs. Like, well, what questions did I have? What was unclear in a poster or a brief that I read? I want to make sure that, that I answer those questions, that, if I read my own poster, if I read my own design brief, that I wouldn't walk away wondering something, right? So feel free to, use this. You may have already done that, but if you haven't, it's a good way to help students synthesize and understand, the rubrics.
And one of the nice things with the website is that since it has so many examples, that it's easier for kids to be able to see, oh, this is what those champions were, or this is what those products that went on were. It really kind of sets a mental bar for them.
And of course, if anyone ever has thoughts, feedback, they're like, I really like the poster, but I'd like, I wonder about this, or could we incorporate this, or the design brief's nice, but this is something I think that could improve it. We always welcome feedback, right? We try to do our best to make sure that the national competition is accessible, that it's rigorous, right? But we're a small team, right? And MESA is a large organization. And we welcome all feedback. If student feedback is always great, teacher feedback is always great, because we're not in the classroom, we're not seeing the day-to-day how students are approaching these projects, and so we depend on feedback from you all to kind of help make sure that this competition is meeting your needs, meeting your students' needs, and again is inclusive, is accessible for all of our MESA students, while keeping it, a rigorous engineering, not specifically, not always engineering, but design competition, STEM focused.
Yeah, so we're trying to practice what we preach, because we are designing for people. So we definitely need feedback. So,
Exactly.
feel free to reach out at any point.